So good morning, everyone. We would typically meet on a Wednesday morning for our monthly Greenville Mentoring Collaborative meetings, but given that we also have a big meeting with On Track Greenville going on during our regularly scheduled meeting, we have decided to do something a little bit cooler even, because we can all refer back to this conversation about a very important topic, mentor training. So welcome everyone to our monthly regularly scheduled meeting that is using a virtual platform today. For those of you who are not familiar with Greenville Mentoring Collaborative, I'm Alicia Brewster. I'm the director for Greenville Mentoring Collaborative, which is a network of mentoring service providers, and other stakeholders working together so that every youth in Greenville has the supportive relationships they need to develop into thriving adults. Our organization does not provide direct services to youth, but we are here to support and cultivate strong and effective programs that are able to serve Greenville's youth today and into the future. So for those, again, who are new to the Greenville Mentoring Collaborative, our mission is to support Greenville County mentoring organizations through advocacy, capacity building, and mentor recruitment. Our vision together is a thriving state of mentoring in Greenville County. Today, our training that will cover mentor orientation training is about introducing, reviewing for some of us, and providing resources for the implementation of the elements of effective practice for mentoring. The elements of effective practice for mentoring is the cornerstone of the national mentoring efforts developed and disseminated first in the 90s to ensure that as the quantity of mentoring increases, that the quality remains front and center. So the elements of effective practice are widely accepted as the global and national standard for quality youth mentoring. And I'm really excited that today we have two people with us who work in this space across our country. Mary Bradford, who I will introduce in just a minute, and we'll get to know her a lot more over the next several months, as well as Samuel Bellamy, who many of you already are familiar with. Before we get to that, though, take a moment and complete the pre-mentor training survey. And I will share what that looks like. You should have a link to this in your email. And it's also linked in the recorded YouTube video. This should take only 5 minutes at the most. We just want to understand what you already know about the elements of effective practice, and in particular about mentor training and mentor orientation. So there are 5 questions, and we do ask that you take just 5 minutes to complete that before you begin or continue this video. As mentioned earlier, we have Mary and Samuel with us today. Many of you know Samuel. He has been a capacity builder and strategic implementer for over a decade, primarily in the youth mentoring sector, but he also manages a portfolio of grant-making projects across 9 counties as a program officer for the Community Foundation down in Charleston, and he is a member of the Greenville Mentoring Collaborative volunteer leadership team. We also have Mary here with us, Mary Bradford. She has been working in the youth development and mentoring fields for over 20 years. She's currently the affiliate director of the ACE DC Mentor Program, and she's director of training for ACE Mentor Program of America. Prior to these roles, Mary served as the coordinator of the Maryland Mentor Resource Center and program director of Beyond the Boundaries, a faith-based program that works to ensure Baltimore residents have access to safe, affordable, and non-discriminatory housing. All very, very important things that we are working on here in Greenville as well. So thank you both for being with us. And before we get started, I know that your bios share a lot about the work that you do, what you're passionate about, but I do want to open it up and just make it a little light and go ahead and get into this conversation that we're going to have by asking Mary. So you have a wonderful resume. I've had the opportunity to speak to you probably 3 or 4 times over the past couple of weeks and have really enjoyed getting to know you. But we haven't really had a chance to talk about some other things that might be going on in life that would be interesting to share. So do you have anything interesting, fun that you don't have in your bio that you want to share with us today?
Interesting and fun. Much of my time, if I'm not working, is spent at home with my 3 kids. I have a 7th grader and a set of twins who are in 6th grade. So you can imagine, like, it's pretty crazy. But interesting and fun. We just got a rescue puppy, and we have added to the chaos of our home. So her name is Holly. So while I probably should be spending more time engaging with my kids' school and doing all that fun stuff, I spend all my time dealing with my new rescue puppy.
Understood. So, Mary, you actually helped me think of something that's pretty cool that's happened in my life recently. I became a grandmother to a little kitten who is just the cutest. I have actually had 3 children myself. And when they were growing up, every Christmas and birthday, they would ask about getting a pet. And our response was always, well, when you are an adult and you're able to take care of your pet, then by all means, please do get one. And I would love that. And so my oldest daughter, who's about to graduate from college, that's exactly what she did. She got her first kitten, and he is really cute.
I love the animals.
Yes. Well, I'm getting there. Samuel, how about you? Do you have anything interesting and fun that you want to share with us?
Not as exciting as getting a new animal. Maybe one day that'll happen. The newest obsession, I guess, in our household is we're trying to become plant parents. So we are researching and doing lots of store visits for the right plant that will allow us to enter into plant parenthood. So that's the latest obsession in the Bellamy household.
Yay! Do you have a grandparent, someone in your realm who can go with you? Because they tend to have, I feel like a lot of the older or seniors, kind of have that just in them.
Unfortunately, we don't. We've gotten lots of good advice. I hope to put some of it to practice soon. We have our eye on a couple of easygoing plants. We hear about the snake plants and the different types of succulents and things like that. So we're just trying to ease our way into it to see what we can not kill. That's the goal.
You'll be great.
Yes. I kill it all. So I appreciate your journey. I'm better off keeping a dog alive than a plant.
It's so crazy how my kids are fine. They're thriving, but plants.
I hear you. I hear you. Good luck, and I wish you well on your journey.
I will keep you posted.
Well, great. Thank you for sharing. And that takes us right into the next thing that we'll be talking about. How do we effectively do what we are trying to do? And I hope, Samuel, that you will get some effective strategies for keeping your plants alive. And today we look forward to hearing about the effective practices for mentoring from you. So since we kicked off our monthly meetings back in 2021 is roughly when the Greenville Mentoring Collaborative started meeting regularly again. we have come to the point where we realize that all of the mentoring organizations were not aware of the elements of effective practice for mentoring, and it was going to be really important that we go through each of those standards as part of our monthly meetings. So what we've covered thus far include recruitment practices and looking at what is in the elements of effective practice for recruitment as well as for screening. We had a fantastic session back in November where one of our partners, Big Brothers Big Sisters, really did a fantastic overview of how they use their screening practices to keep kids safe. They gave us different scenarios, talked through some of the nuances and considerations that are balanced in order to have a diverse pool of mentors while also maintaining the safety measures. And then last month, 2 members of our collaborative presented on ACEs and began talking about some of the things that as a mentor and as a program, we should keep in mind. And they did a fantastic job from what I understand. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to be a part of that particular training, but it was one where, again, I got lots of feedback from our mentoring program partners who were not familiar with ACEs. And many times I think in the education space and in the mentoring space, sometimes we assume that there's already this, knowledge that's widely known, but there are things like that we definitely need to go back because they're so important. So adverse childhood experiences was last month's topic. We also, back in March, worked on group activities to develop recruitment strategies for various demographics. In particular, in our community, we are really working to be intentional around recruiting males, and in particular, Black males, as well as Spanish-speaking mentors, because we do have now a growing number of Spanish-speaking households looking for mentors for their youth. So that was something that was discussed. And then, of course, with all of them, we've talked about how we need to begin with the end in mind. So even though recruitment, is kind of primary to get things going, we still should keep that at the forefront, that at the end, we want for our youth to be successful, to have met the goals of the program. And so when we promote our programs, that we want to be realistic when we're describing it to mentors so that when they get into the orientation sessions and the training sessions, which we'll get to, that it doesn't surprise them when they get to that point, or even when they get into the match relationship, that they're not surprised by their role and responsibilities and some of the things, the challenges that they may face. So we've had conversations, and they've been good to get a lot of, hopefully, questions answered that programs have been kind of unsure about how to handle, but also to, again, set in place some just foundational things that will help to hopefully create a more successful program, which will then provide a platform for more success for our students and youth. So today we are at the orienting and training portion of our journey through the elements of effective practice for mentoring. And I want to kick off the discussion by asking you, Samuel, I'll start with you. Why is mentor training important for a successful quality mentoring program? Mentor training, we talk about it, and I think people kind of assume, okay, you're going to do that, but why is it so important for the success of a quality program?
Yeah, I think, mentor training over the years has had many iterations and evolutions. And I think the most important reason that I would point out to mentor training being critical to the success of your program is that you are building little humans. You're building relationships. You're building connections And a lot of times that's not something that comes intrinsic for everyone. I also have to just point out the fact that, before mentoring programs came along, you had, what we would consider informal or natural mentoring, where it would be, a big brother or uncle or aunt just taking you under your wing, going to the grocery store with them, helping you do, routine tasks and things like that. That relationship was already established. There was already a baseline comfort level. Then when mentoring, professional or structured mentoring programs came onto the scene, what you're really talking about doing is introducing people who don't know one another into the lives of another person. That mentor training helps shorten that gap. It helps break down some of those walls or barriers between communication. And it really equips the mentor with the confidence, if you will, to go into that relationship with their eyes wide open, with a level of trust and confidence, and more importantly, for the fidelity of your program, you're looking for a certain outcome. So it's not something that just happens. You can't just put people in a room and it will automatically happen. It's something that you do have to guide and nurture. And that includes training for it to make sure that you get the result that you actually need to get for your program.
Thank you. You brought up lots of good reasons. And I will say that confidence, I think, is a large player in the success of a mentoring relationship. And sometimes as a new person in the mentoring scene, you may not feel as confident. And so having that support, but also the guidance and instruction, I think does help to build that confidence. Mary, did you have anything to add to that?
I think that I would agree with everything there. I would, add, I think one thing that we know from, there's a little bit of research around mentor trainings and its impact, but we know that when mentors are trained before going into the mentoring relationship and exactly everything that Samuel was just saying, that they're more likely to stick with the relationship, that they stay around longer. And so from a programmatic standpoint, it's worth the time investment. A lot of times it seems like that's a lot of time from a staffing standpoint to train, but it actually saves you time in the long run, because if you train your mentors well and they build these relationships, they're not leaving the program, they're staying. And so you don't have to onboard new mentors over and over. And so training is it's really a tool in the tool belt of program success. And well worthwhile putting together a good training. And the other thing that always sticks with me with training is years ago learning that exactly as Samuel was saying, that when we're in these structured, formalized mentoring relationships where we're being, put together with a young person that we don't really know, if we don't go at it correctly, we can actually cause more harm than good. And so we want to make sure that we train our mentors so that they're doing things in a way that is positive for the people that they're interacting with. If we're going to work with these tiny humans, then we want to make sure that we're sending volunteers into the relationship who just continue to create positivity and use research-based best practices to have meaningful impacts. That's always stuck with me, that idea that we can sometimes, even the best intentioned person can cause more harm than good if we don't prepare them for what's happening.
Yeah, that's really good. You're exactly right. And unfortunately, even as parents, we sometimes do, we start with the best intentions, but may not have the guidance and support that we need to, effectively do it. So very good point. You mentioned also, I think, something about evidence-based practices. So I was actually going to ask if you could talk to us about, the elements of effective mentoring practice and what that is exactly.
Sure. So as you guys know, the elements are put together. I think we're on our fourth edition of them. I just opened it and realized they've made new changes that I was like, wait, what? So they're constantly evolving. And they're constantly evolving because they're based on research. They're based on programs, what's successful, utilizing studies. That's why I like it. It's really concrete evidence about why you should do a certain component for your mentoring program. And it goes through all of the different, I think it's 6, is that right? 6 elements of, I should know off the top of my head. I know them, I just can't count the numbers, of what a successful mentoring program will use to be a long-lasting and impactful program is really our goal. We don't want mentor programs that are just kind of coming and going in the lives of young people. We want mentor programs that have stick-to-itiveness to it. And we know the elements help with that. So one of the elements is the training. And it goes through what is part of training, what should be in training, a little bit of research on it. I'm always diving into the studies. And then in addition to the elements, in the last, I guess, maybe year or two, probably longer than that, during that time suck of COVID, I feel like we lost some time, that they have come out with supplements to the elements. So if you're a mentor program that is doing, for example, STEM-based mentoring, there's a supplement for that. And then they have extra information on what you might want to include in training, or if you're doing workplace mentoring or group mentoring. So they're really handbooks to use for mentor programs, and they've got a good chunk on what to include in your training.
Wow. Well, that makes it a lot easier for our mentoring programs then to be able to kind of have a checklist of what needs to be a part of, at the foundational level. And then, of course, they can, tweak it with their own context as well. So thank you for sharing that. Samuel, so training, I think most of us would say that we deliver some sort of training for our mentoring programs, hopefully. But I think that I also hear that there are some programs that offer an orientation as well as a training. I haven't heard that from everyone, but I do know from my own experiences that I have been a part of programs that offered an orientation in addition to the training. So can you share about what an organization or a program should include in an orientation?
Yeah, absolutely. I also want to add on a little bit to what Mary was saying. The wonderful thing about Mentor and their elements of effective practice is that it is based on, it's rooted in science. It's rooted in that theory and that evidence. But what makes the tools and resources that Mentor provides is that it's not only evidence-based, but it's also practitioner approved. Mm-hmm. And that distinction just means that, you have a bunch of really smart people with initials behind their name coming up with the science behind how to build relationships. But then they hand that information over to people like myself or Mary or you, or any of the programs that we're working with. And they say, tell us if this makes sense. Tell us if this works in the real world. And it's sort of a marrying of the two approaches, and only the best, only the things that actually work from a science perspective, but also in real practice is what makes it into the elements of effective practice. So it's not just that ivory tower, the PhD, the researcher said that this is how you do it. It also takes individuals on the ground to say, yeah, we tried it and it actually doesn't work the way that you said it does. So we need to retool that. Which I think is a really important distinction, because I don't want anyone to just think, oh, well, it's probably from people who don't know what they're talking about, or who've never been in front of children, who've never been in the classroom, who've never been in the community. Sometimes it's a little bit of that, but more often than not, it's a combined effort between both. And that's what makes the elements of effective practice so important and impactful for organizations. So I just
thank you. That was great information.
And as far as orientations, so a lot of people do feel like mentor orientations and mentor trainings are one and the same. They can be delivered at the same time, but they're actually talking about two completely different things. Mentor orientation, from my perspective, has always been about laying the foundation or setting the culture of your organization. So, during an orientation, like you see on the slides, you might be talking about the mission or vision or the why behind why the organization was started, what problem you're trying to solve. The who, like, who are you trying to serve? Who are you trying to help? And in what ways your organization sets out to do that. A proper orientation also goes over the common goals and expectations of the program. every program is going to be different. There are some organizations who are, like we mentioned earlier, they're STEM-based organizations. They're trying to introduce a new way of thinking to young people. There are some mentoring programs that are really about trying to tackle, or not tackle, but curve problematic behaviors. There are some organizations that are really about introducing new themes and ideas to expand the horizons of young people. Every mentoring program is setting out to do a different thing. And orientations will really set apart what your organization is here to do, why it exists, and why that mentor's role is so important. It also goes over the policies and the procedures of the organization. So things like, how do we communicate with the families? How do we best communicate with the mentees? It might go over, different ethical examples and situations. For example, you might have been used to working in a community-based organization where you worked one-on-one, and it was maybe okay for you to drive your mentee from one location to another. Well, if you're working in a new organization, maybe a school-based organization, that practice that was okay in one mentoring program might not be okay in another organization. So it's things like that you go over to orientate the mentor on what your organization is about, and most importantly, setting the culture and the foundation of how things will progress as they go forward. And I do think that's a completely different, training and script and level setting that has to occur before mentor training actually happens. And I think that's the most important part. Again, it's going to look differently for every organization. But I do think the things that we just mentioned are probably going to be the most common things that you should go over in a mentor orientation. And the one thing that we don't talk about often is not only do you need to go over that with your mentor, but you also need to go over that with your mentee and the family. I think every training that you give a mentor, you probably need to give some type of overview for the mentee and the parent. There was, long gone are the days where you can just give it to one party and expect everyone to know what to do. Mentoring from a theory perspective has been around for ages, but leveraging the resource that is mentoring is something that's still very new. Parents may not know how to fully access all the information and resources that are available to an organization. A mentor might not fully know how to access all the resources that's available through the program. So I think there has to be, an orientation for the mentor, but also an orientation for the mentee and the parent as well, so that everybody knows what's expected. Everyone comes to the relationship on even ground. Everyone knows who to communicate when something goes wrong, but also where and who to communicate with when things go right, and how to keep those things going right. So a good, strong orientation is going to be the foundation of a good mentor training, if you wanted to combine them. But they don't have to be, done at the same time. So that's orientation.
Yeah. And I love too that you mentioned that this is necessary, not just for the mentor, but mentee and the family, whoever is going to be a part of that, making that relationship successful.
Absolutely.
Good level setting. So this is the mentor orientation, kind of an overview of what you would see there. Mary, do you want to talk about mentor training? Sure. What is the difference? What we see?
Sure. If you want to advance to the next slide, I can definitely kind of wrap it into that. So absolutely, totally agree. Orientation is its, own kind of freestanding event that happens. I mean, if you can put it with training, that's great. But they are two kind of distinct opportunities to inform mentors of what's going on. Mentor training in and of itself, again, this is coming out of the elements of effective practice. What we know is a huge benefit of mentor training that Samuel and I didn't discuss before is it's a great screening tool, and orientation is as well. Anytime during pre-match you have these in-person opportunities to get together with your mentor is an opportunity to keep looking for any potential red flags. And if within the elements, they do have some, suggested, you can't find them all, and we can't list them all as I was saying, it's a practitioner guide, but some things that you might see during a mentor training. And when we say screening tool, it's not necessarily looking for someone to weed out of your program. It's looking for someone that maybe needs a little bit more support in the mentoring relationship. Maybe when you do your training, they're asking a lot of questions and you realize, wow, this person hasn't really been around young people much. I'm going to make sure that their match support person is checking in more frequently. And then you might have another person who you can tell from the way they're answering questions that they have been around young people a lot. Maybe, you find out that they're a teacher, and doesn't mean they don't need match support, but they need different support. And so it really kind of lets you screen your potential mentors to know what kind of support. And then you can also hear if there's somebody who's setting off some kind of gut reactions. It's an opportunity to follow up. So mentor training really can be looked at as part of your screening package. I also think it's a great way to determine commitment to the program. When I was doing mentor trainings with my program, I had a little bit of struggle with board buy-in on it, making it a requirement. And my point was, if someone doesn't show up for a training, I don't want them, because I can't guarantee they're going to show up for visits and sessions. If someone can't show up for a training, that makes me question their consistency and their commitment right away. Obviously, conflicts happen. You need to have lots of opportunities for trainings. You can't have one night and be like, well, you didn't come. I don't want you in my program. But it really is a great way to determine commitment and if a mentor is going to be consistent to your program. It's a great recruitment tool. There are some programs who do it all in one. They're like, hey, come be a mentor. We'll train you. So you can use it as that. It does build confidence, as we discussed. And then there's a little bit of research that shows that 2 hours of pre-match training, that's kind of the gold standard in the elements, is to have a 2-hour training that takes place before the mentors ever meet the young people, that it leads to stronger and longer lasting matches. And we've been talking a lot about pre-match training. I will note that one of the enhancements in the elements of effective practice is ongoing training, the training that occurs after the match is made. It's really important. And in the next slide, I'll really quickly run through what they recommend for that pre-match training. But a lot of times programs just kind of forget that ongoing support that programs need. If you are working with a program that's doing STEM-based mentoring, you might want some ongoing support on how to do project-based learning, how to get students to, settle down in a group setting. If you're working with a certain population, you might need to have that adverse childhood experience training that you can't fit into your mentor training because it's too much, right? So then we need some follow-up trainings. And always consider these follow-up trainings as a way to see if your mentors need additional support. They're great opportunities for that. And programs, again, kind of shy away from asking volunteers to do more outside of the mentoring relationship. I have found in all of my time that mentors really want these trainings. They'll come to the ones that are issues that pertain to them. If you offer conflict resolution, mentors almost always show up to that one because they're like, I'm having some conflict. How do I get through this? And so ask your mentors what ongoing training and support they need and be responsive to their needs. But it's a great risk reduction to have these ongoing trainings, and it's a great retention. Consider ongoing trainings as part of your retention strategy because your mentors feel supported as part of your program. If you want to just advance really quickly, I will. This is really quick. This is just cut and paste this is what would be in a training. It looks a little bit like what's in an orientation, but it's kind of its own thing. And so this is where people get the kind of that merge happens. But we're going to go over kind of goals and expectations for the mentee, for the guardian, just like Samuel was saying, like everybody in the room needs to know what their expectations are, because that will help someone be less likely to quit the program. Right? If the mentor thinks I'm supposed to be here for 2 hours a week and the student thinks I'm only here for 30 minutes a week, we got a problem. And so part of your training is going through that, going through roles. And then a lot of a mentor training is really about how do relationships develop? What are some of the ethical and safety issues that can arise? We definitely want to talk about how do we close the relationship if the mentor needs to move on or if we need to redefine what it looks like. We're going to talk about where mentors can get support when they run into roadblocks or struggles, so they're not going at this alone. And then we talk about opportunities and challenges that can be happening when you're working with any youth. Youth are their own breed. We have to learn how to work with a middle schooler versus a high schooler versus a second grader. And your training should really target those different developmental milestones. And then what should be a part of every training is understanding cultural humility and recognizing some of the cultural similarities and differences that matches might have. So this is kind of what the element of effective practices would say is part of kind of that mentor 101, what good trainings would have. As Samuel said, though, it also should be informed by your program practices and what's going to work for your program. But this is kind of over the years. I can say I went to a mentor training when I was in college a long, long time ago. I won't age myself. It had almost the exact same steps. I mean, there's just certain things we know we have to train mentors on.
Wonderful. Thank you. And it's good to know, too, that there are just some fundamental things that we know has to be done. And, things get tweaked over the years as we learn more. But at the very minimum, these are the things that we should do.
Yep.
And,
my next slide is the enhancements real quick.
Okay, perfect.
That's what Samuel was starting to get into, that we train our mentees, families. So at the I don't want to say bare minimum, but we know programs are stretched thin on resources. And so that's what I love about the elements is it recognizes program capacity. We really want you to do that pre-match training at 2 hours. We really want that for mentors. But what we would love to see as an enhancement is to also offer it to mentees and to families to have that ongoing training. And then if you go into those supplemental guides for the elements of effective practice, you will see even more training recommendations. I spend a lot of time in the STEM guide. That's why I keep referencing it. Their pre-match gold standard is like 6 hours. It's a lot, but it's great advice to consider and to start as a goal and aspiration to work into your program is what those enhancements are. So if you don't have a baseline training, you want to get there. And if you do have a baseline training, let's start thinking about enhancements.
Perfect. All right. I love it. So 2 hours. And for someone who wants to be in a committed mentoring relationship with a young person, that seems something that's reasonable. And then, of course, getting into the specific, types of programs that may be, an additional, hour or 2 or 3 to be able to be trained effectively to accomplish the goals of that program. Thank you for sharing that. What I just actually finished up Big Brothers Big Sisters training, and it was the first time I've ever been trained as a Big Brothers Big Sisters mentor, and I was really impressed that the training that was presented, that was done online, there was a lot of quizzing throughout to see if I understood the material that was presented. So even though it wasn't in person, I felt like I was getting almost an in-person experience where I could even have do-overs and there was an explanation if I did miss something. And then what I also appreciated was, as you mentioned, the orientation and training, all of this is all part of the screening process. And so when I had follow-up meetings with program staff, as they were also reiterating some of the things that were shown in the training and in the orientation portion, they were also trying to, I think, find out more about me as a person to be able to see if I would, be a good fit for the program. So all of these touch points, I agree. And I've seen it in work through the Big Brothers Big Sisters program recently. And it seems to be pretty effective. And I was very impressed by it as a mentor going into their program, new to the Big Brothers Big Sisters process.
Yeah. They are definitely kind of the gold standard of training. They merge training and I love the idea of quizzes and tests, especially for orientation, where there's things that you really like talking about. Transportation. It's a really important element for a program to make sure you know the rules on transportation. And so I kind of like that as a testing virtual, because then I'm like, did you get it? Did you really get it? You may not. So I think it's a good balance to find that for programs. And COVID has helped us with virtual. People are more comfortable with it. I still highly encourage the in-person trainings, especially when you're talking about relationship development. But I know in my programs, we do more, I like the testing. I like a little quiz to be like, were you listening or were you on your phone?
Yeah. Sometimes that happens. We're getting there after work and trying to wrap up something, with your own child. So yes, it definitely is needed. Just check in with us. So thinking back to, I know, Mary, you have 20 plus years of experience in this field. So have you ever seen training or orientation that you didn't feel was effective for preparing a mentor to serve in that role?
I've seen organizations that don't quite have training yet. I find that you don't have to be perfect at the training. I don't know if Samuel would agree with this. You don't have to be perfect at it. A lot of times it's getting people in a room and kind of talking through the points that you want to hit on. So I don't know if I would say I've seen a bad training. What I have seen is programs where I'm like, oh God, why aren't you training? Like, why aren't you don't have any screening? You're just going to put them together and say, that's when I start to panic. But I would say, because there are a lot of programs who I think, natural mentoring has been around for so long, and we assume that it's okay to just, let these relationships go. And it is. We need to make sure they're supported and that it's done correctly. So I don't think I've ever seen one that's bad. I would say what's not great, and we all fall into this, my own program included, is we get through the orientation stuff and we're like, oh, gosh, let's just hurry up through the training part, because the orientation is so heavy, because we're talking about like child safety and we're talking about transportation and don't do this. And you feel like you're yelling at your mentor so much that by the time you get to the training part of it, you're like, just hurry up, guys. I know you want to get out of here. And so it's a common pitfall.
Okay. Yeah,
Totally understandable. We are all stretched thin. And when you're the one training and you're staring at a room of mentors who look like they are just so done, and you have just scared the life out of them by going through all the child abuse stuff, it's why I would actually recommend separating them if you can. But that's hard. It's really, I'm a one-man show at my job. I get it. It's really hard to do that. So it's a lot that we ask of organizations. And sometimes it's prioritizing. But yeah, that would be a mistake even I have made. I've looked in the room and I've seen the mentors look like they're about to fall asleep. And I'm like, okay, well, let's just quickly run through how to be a good mentor.
That's good. But also reassuring, as you said, that if you have the foundational pieces and you cover that information, and of course you're supporting the mentor after that with additional follow-up training as needed, then that's what we should be striving toward. Have you had any horror stories or any situations that you want to share about?
I think when you've been doing it as long as we have, there are always horror stories, and there are always cautionary tales. I think, one of the things that, let me say two things. One, back to Mary's training, I think the biggest way to separate between what happens in an orientation and what happens in a mentor training, if you can think of it like this, a mentor orientation is telling you the why you do things. A mentor training is giving you the what you do and how you do it. So it could be the same subject matter, but you're giving it two different perspectives. So circling, fast forwarding to your question about the horror stories, I think the biggest disservice that you can do for your mentors is not having examples, not having opportunities to role play. Again, I think sometimes we conflate natural mentoring, which just occurs in the community with could be family or close friends that already have a relationship with one another. I think we conflate that with what we're talking about in a structured mentoring program, where we're putting essentially strangers together and we're asking them to go along on this journey. A lot of times they don't know how to do that. They don't know how to effectively build a relationship with a young person who might only be there because their parents told them, not because there was a natural desire to be there. So there is going to be that friction. They might not fully understand that all relationships go through some sort of cycle. And it's not that the young person doesn't like you. It's just that they haven't opened up. They don't know you yet. And this isn't the time to get discouraged. So I think any I think all training is necessary. Some trainings are obviously going to be more effective than others, but I think the most disaster stories that I've ever seen is just, assuming that every adult that says they want to mentor knows how to do it effectively, and taking their word for it that they do. I think anytime that I've ever seen that happen, it never ends well. So no matter how experienced they are, there's always going to be some sort of orientation or training that's needed, because there's a certain way, based off of the kids that you serve, a certain way that you want adults to approach that relationship, to approach the goals of the organization, and approach, the supportive environment. And you have to train for it. You can't just throw people in them and say, here, go for it. They're kids, you know what to do. Like it's not that type of thing. And any disaster that I've ever seen, that's typically what it's been a result of. It's someone just saying, you know what to do. go do your thing.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I've experienced that as well. But thank you for bringing that up. So frequently asked questions. What should a mentoring program be prepared to answer? What have y'all seen or heard from mentors kind of consistently in the past?
There is nothing consistent in frequently asked questions. Yeah, I can't think of, they'll ask it all, be ready for it.
Anything that you've heard, Samuel?
I think the most consistent question that I hear is really around how to handle separated parents. I think sometimes what will happen is, if the parents are separated, mom will want support, by bringing in a mentor. But dad doesn't feel the same way. So sometimes that support at home isn't there. I've also seen those situations go very, very wrong where, the dad may feel that as if bringing in a mentor automatically means that he's not a good parent. So I think and this is probably something that can be tackled in the orientation, but there needs to be some sort of level set to say that mentoring isn't just for bad kids. Mentoring is for all kids, for everyone at every level, because what we're really talking about is building a support system, a supportive relationship, that even if you come from a great background, you can always use the extra support. You can always use the boost of social capital. So a lot of questions really stem around, how do you handle people who are not on board? How do you handle communication issues between, the child and the parent? How far do I go? In an ideal world, the relationship hits off and goes really well. And it's not too long before the mentor is going to be asking, hey, this mentee has opened up about these issues. Is this something that I share with the parent? How much of this information am I supposed to keep to myself? Am I betraying some sort of trust by, tipping off the parent to say, hey, look into this, or, so I think, again, it comes back to some of those ethical issues, the communication, things like that. When you don't give that, those mentors are lost. They don't really know what to do. They don't want to betray trust, but they also want to make sure that they're adhering to the rules of the program. And sometimes, if you don't leave space for those questions, or if you don't build that atmosphere of curiosity, they won't ask, they'll make their own decisions. And oftentimes that's where the confusion sets in at.
Oh, that was a great example. Thank you for sharing that one. And Mary, I agree that we should be prepared for any number of questions that might come our way.
I'll just add that if programs are doing match support, that kind of question about, you can see a trend in what is happening in your program in the past, and that should inform your be prepared for questions. And then what I'll also add is, if you don't know the answer, don't make it up. If you're doing a training and someone asks you a question and you don't know it, say, I'll get back to you, because there is a wealth of resources out there. You can probably Google it and you'll probably find a training that a mentor affiliate did somewhere, because it's each affiliate has different things because they're working with different populations, unique to their region. And so don't make up the answer. Don't just wing it. Just say, I'll get back to you, because we want to make sure we give like that well thought out of an answer that Samuel just gave for that kind of a question that comes up. But the match support would also have, could inform what some of the trends are in your program.
Wonderful. Thank you for adding that. Well, so we've come to the end, and I'm sure that we probably have some programs that are going to be wondering, okay, I'm missing a piece. I don't have orientation, or maybe I don't have training. So where do I start? How do I get started with this? Mary, do you want to speak to some of the resources and even kind of where do you start?
Sure. So, obviously you and I are working on resources that will be available to the Greenville Mentoring Collaborative. Over the next couple of months, we'll have some grab and go resources that you guys can use, because as we just said, what's happening in your region is different than what's happening in other regions. When I hear Samuel's example question, I'm like, never had that before in my programs, because that's not the population we're working with. So we want to make sure that we get resources that are curated for your program needs. But if you're itching today and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm freaking out, I don't have training, take a deep breath. It's okay. The goal of this is not to scare you into paralysis. The goal of trainings like this is to help you say, I want this. I want my program to be better. And so your first stop is mentoring.org. They have an entire online training series called Becoming a Better Mentor, and they're videos. You could just send those out to your mentors right now and be like, all right, watch this. Let's start here. And then the National Mentoring Resource Center has a search feature where you can go in and click mentor trainings. No one wants you to reinvent the wheel. The world of mentoring is a space where we share. Like if someone has done it, we're not going to hide it and keep it to ourselves. We want to share it. We want everybody to have the resources, which is what I love about being a TA here, is there's no, this is mine, keep this to my program. I have a training manual. Do you want it? And so go research it, and you'll find sample training manuals, sample training guides to help you so that you can get started. And so the goal here is not to scare everybody. The goal here is to get as many adults who are interacting with young people trained so that they can do it better. These are just two resources. I have like a slew, but I think these are two really good, solid starting points to begin your journey. And when you get there, you'll find that there's a lot out there to support you in training. And then I'll just say, last thing is, if you have a particular topic, all the mentor affiliates across the country are doing trainings. You can Google it, and I guarantee you're going to find a training. It might not be exactly on point, but you could send it to a mentor if they ask a question. I'm struggling with XYZ in my mentoring relationship. And you could say, look, I don't have a training for that yet, but somebody else did it. Why don't you watch this and at least get some information out there? Don't reinvent the wheel. We're all here to support everybody who's involved in mentoring.
I love it. Thank you. And as a collaborative, that's the ethos that we are really working to build, is that we are here to support one another, to make ourselves and each other better for our youth and our community. And then, of course, if someone has like a specific question for you, thank you, Mary, for adding your email, and the same with you, Samuel. Do you have any final comments, Samuel, or remarks?
No, I think Mary covered it very, very well. Yeah. Always, when in doubt, reach out with questions.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. We are here for each other. Great. So I will close then with a final announcement. So our next in-person meeting is June 14th, and we will be back at the United Way in Greenville from 9 to 10:30. We will be talking about matching and initiating, so getting the actual match started. We will also have a big announcement. We'll be presenting our strategic plan, at least as it is to this point, so that we can hear back from our collaborative partners and begin to work on finalizing the action steps that we'll take to bring that to reality. I, again, want to thank you, Mary and Samuel, I am so excited because we had Samuel, which was like one of the most wonderful resources, who is always just a phone call away. But now to have you, Mary, to be able to work with us on these materials that we'll be able to make available to our mentoring partners is just bringing it up to the next level. So thank you both. And we look forward to working with you over the next several months. I hope that you have a wonderful rest of your day and look forward to seeing you again soon.